Amzo's wonderful presentation. This week it's about a hermit crab, so feel free to just kind of sit back and relax while she tells you all about them. When the presentation is completed, everyone will have an opportunity to walk in front of the table and take a look at one up close and personal. Afterwards, there is an activity that's associated with the hermit crab. If you have time, feel free to stay. If not, there are coloring pages that you can take home to share with friends, neighbors, family, and or if you stay for the craft, feel free to take those coloring pages as well. Not working? All right. So it's not working, so we'll have to. I'm sorry.
And I'll try to check my voice so everybody can hear me.
Yep. No, please. Thank you.
Okay. So hi, my name is Jessie, and I work over at our Nampa Samsos, and I have brought little hermit crabs to show with you guys today. They're all pretty shy right now, so that's very common for hermit crabs. So they see danger, they go right back in their shell.
They're sleeping in their shell. They're in their shell. I know it because I see their shell and they're inside it. They're using their big claws to shut. I see those.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about them, and then we'll have some questions at the end, okay? Okay. So, with hermit crabs, they live out right on the ocean line, out in the sand, and these are actually land hermit crabs. There's a difference. There's a land hermit crab, and there's also marine hermit crabs. Marine hermit crabs actually live in the ocean, and they don't come out of the water. So they're fully aquatic. They live in the water. Now these guys, they are land hermit crabs, but the difference between them is hermit crabs don't have lungs. They actually have gills. So it's actually very important for them to have moisture in order to breathe properly. If they don't have moisture, they can actually dry out very easily and they can die from that. So when you have a hermit crab tank set up, what you want to do is you want to have two water sources. You want to have one for fresh water and the second one for salt water. Now we do sell little water conditioners. One of them is to dechlorinate your tap water for fresh water. That's this one. And the second one is to dechlorinate your water for salt water. So hermit crabs actually need the combination of the two to keep their gills functioning properly, to have a happy, healthy hermit crab. Now also a really beneficial thing to have with your hermit crabs, we use this at my store. It's called Rectifogger, and what it does is actually puts fog and mist in the tank. It creates a lot of moisture, humidity. They can breathe a lot better with this in there. It's not an absolute necessity, but it does make it a lot easier to maintain the moisture in the tank. Or what you can do is you can keep your sand in your tank nice and damp. You can even add a bit of cocoa fiber in with the sand, and you keep that nice and moist and damp, and use mist daily. That helps keep the moisture up in the tank. Now, hermit crabs are ectothermic. Ectothermic meaning that they can't produce their own body temperature. So they need to warm up from the outside in order to keep their body temperature warmer. So they generally like it about 70 to 80 degrees in their enclosure. That helps with good digestion, overall well health of the animal. Now, these little heater pads are great. A lot of people normally keep their houses about 70 to 80 degrees, but if your house runs a little cooler, these are great to up the temperature in the tank about 10 degrees. Make sure it stays nice and warm in there for them. Now these I like to recommend. It's a heating pad, and what it does is you take it out of the box, you take the sticky part off the back, and you adhere it to the bottom of the tank. Now you always want to create a thermal gradient. Thermal gradient is technically a fancy word for a hot side and a cool side. So it gives them the option if they're too cold, they can go warm up. If they're too hot, they can go cool down. So all your heat should always be on one side of your tank. And then, hermit crabs are actually really good climbers. They climb a lot. Some people even take coconut fiber cloths, like you put in the bottom of a hanging basket. That actually works great for across the back, so they can crawl on it. Plants like these, they'll actually crawl all the way to the top and sit up top up there too. They love to crawl. So anything like grapewood vines, driftwood pieces, they actually love to crawl on. It's actually very beneficial for them. Now, hermit crabs are also communal. They do really like having a small group of little hermit crabs. So, generally when getting a hermit crab, you want to maybe at least get two and help them keep them happy. Now, in a little tank, something like this, I would probably max out at maybe 4 small ones. And that would house that just fine. Now, a 10-gallon tank, you could do more, like the larger hermit crabs here, and you could do a couple of those. You just don't want to overcrowd your tank, and because that can start a little bicker and fight between each other. So keeping lots of space too helps, but they do like friends. So talk about that. So for a diet for a hermit crab, we have a formulated pellet diet, which helps to make sure they're getting all their nutrients. Now, hermit crabs are scavengers, so that means they eat just about anything they can find. So they eat both proteins and greens. So they eat like seaweed, grasses, stuff like that. They'll also even eat leftover fish parts. Like if a dead fish washed on shore, they'll munch that up too. Good protein for them. But this is great for their proteins, and then also on top of that, you can give them fresh greens like lettuce, and you can give them carrots, bell pepper, mango, something tasty. They like that too. Now, for hermit crabs, their shell is actually not their own. They actually scavenge that, they find an old snail shell, and they move into there. So they don't actually grow that shell. They find one and they move into it. So when they start growing, they actually have to move from that shell and move to a bigger sized one. So they're always looking for new shells on the beach. And they're funny. They'll actually, out in the wild, they'll make a nice big line for one shell, and they'll all take turns trying out the shell. And then actually whichever one fits, they'll take that one and they'll move on to another shell. But they're actually very picky about their shells too, so you actually do want to offer a couple different sizes for them to choose from. You always want to make sure that the new shell that you get is slightly bigger than the old one that he's in currently, so that gives him room to grow. Now, when hermit crabs grow, they actually have to molt, much like what a tarantula would do. So what they do is they go into a molting phase, and they actually slow down on their eating habits, and they'll tend to hide out. And they actually really love to burrow where it's safe, because as soon as they molt, their carapace, their exoskeleton, actually cracks open, and they kind of just crawl out of it. So, in that period of time, they're actually very soft and squishy, very delicate. So being buried and staying in their shell helps them so they can harden their shell and make it safe for them to protect themselves against predators. So during that time, it actually takes a hermit crab roughly a month during that whole molting process. So it does take a while. Now it's actually very tempting to check on your hermit crab while he's going through that process, but they do recommend you give him at least 4 weeks without disturbing him, and then after those 4 weeks you could actually go in and check on him. But you still want to be careful because they're very delicate at this stage. Now, let's see. So with molting, they actually, when they're young, they'll molt several times in a year. So they're growing quickly when they're little. So as once they reach more of like a year of age, they actually will only molt once within 12 to 18 months. So the molting really slows down at that point. So something like this little guy, he'd be molting a lot during this year. The bigger guys will be molting a lot less. So that's one thing when you get a younger little bitty hermit crab, you might not see him all that much because he's going to be busy molting constantly. So that's one thing to think about when you're looking to buy a hermit crab too. When you get little ones, they're going to be kind of tucked away and buried for a little while. Now, let's see. And actually, with hermit crabs, it can be common for them to lose an appendage, like a claw or a leg. And so when they do that, they can actually, they'll go into a molt sooner than normal, because when they go through their molt, they can start growing that appendage back. So they can grow that appendage back. It would just take a process of a few months until that's fully formed. So, let's see. Now, a neat little trick that they do in case they get into a little dry spell, the hermit crabs will actually retain a little bit of water in the shell. That helps if they get dried out, they can actually go and retrieve moisture in their shell to help coat their gills and keep them healthy and breathing properly. Funny little survival fact for them. Now, let's see what So, a lot of people don't realize too, with hermit crabs, they actually live a very long time. They could live up to 25 years. It's actually quite a commitment like a tortoise would be. So, but as long as you make sure you keep their moisture up, their temperatures up, and you give them places to burrow so that they can molt, you can have a happy, healthy crab for a very long time. And it's actually, there's a lot of different sites you can go on the internet, and it actually shows you really very naturalistic terrariums that you can set up, and they're a lot of fun to set up. And they have them crawling all over. Having a hermit crab crawl over the tank is a good, healthy sign. If you have a hermit crab that's just sitting in a corner, he's probably not getting enough moisture to breathe properly, or he might need a buddy. So it's also good to do a lot of research before you just go into hermit crab. They're not quite just a throwaway pet that you just stick in a bowl. You can do that, but I mean, he's gonna die very shortly. So I recommend a lot of research before hermit crab, and they can be a lot of fun, happy little critters. Let's see. Think anything else I've got? Well, we can bring them out and let them walk and see if they'll wander around a little bit for you. So these are the little guys. And they actually kind of suck right back up in the shell there, and they use that big claw as kind of like a door, a big shield right up front so nothing can get in there and try and pull them out. But that's the little guy. He's kind of my busy one. Might come out there. And usually when you're bringing your hermit crabs out to come and look around, they might take a little while to kind of come out. Now this is my bigger ones. This is more of an adult hermit crab. Now these guys, there's actually 2 different species of the hermit crabs.
There goes the shell.
That's
cute.
Just have you guys sit back down once we are done. We'll actually let you guys come by. Gotta make sure everybody can see them. But there's actually 2 different species. There is actually one that actually does have a nice big bright purple claw, and there's another that actually is more dull like this, a little more grayish in color. Try to come out there. But hermit crabs actually have eye stalks, like a snail would have, and they'll have little antennas too, so they can kind of poke their little eyes out there, so everybody can kind of see.
Oh, cool.
Now, hermit crabs, they actually,
We're getting bubbles.
they have a little abdomen that goes into the shell, and that's actually where all their organs are. So all their organs are protected back in the shell. So it makes them a little tougher and sturdier to live out in that kind of environment. Okay. So that's about all I've got for them. We'll move on to some questions.